Tonight, war and hunger. The war in Ukraine fueling a worldwide crisis of food insecurity, plus the sanctions effect.
They haven't gone after the big money-making elements of the Russian economy yet.
As the U.S. considers labeling Russia a state sponsor of terror.
This is going to be a pink wave.
The year of the Republican woman.
I am running against a man who, combined with Joe Biden, has been in office for 89 years.
Only bigger.
I'm running to save the American dream.
And amid the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, a wave of terror in Israel.
So this is coming from the top.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The ripple effect of war now driving hunger across the globe. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder. Global leaders are racing to prevent a famine from spreading to countries around the world as a result of Russia's war on Ukraine. And tonight fears that the longer the fighting lasts, the worse the situation could get. A developing food crisis spiraling into catastrophe. CBN Washington correspondent Matt Galka has our top story. Matt?
Well, Jenna, Ukraine is known as the world's breadbasket because of the sheer amount of grain it provides to multiple countries. But those wheat fields have since been cut off from the global regular supply, leaving millions in a potential food crisis.
I wish we were meeting under different circumstances, but the reality is that we're facing rising global food insecurity.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen kicked off these high-level meetings by focusing on the dangerous ripple effect of the Russian war on Ukraine. Yellen told her global economic counterparts that Russia is to blame for exacerbating a widespread food crisis.
This threat touches the most vulnerable people the hardest, families that are already spending disproportionate amounts of their income on food. Moreover, the interconnectedness of the global food system means that people on every continent are impacted.
Yellen pointed out that before the war began, some 800 million people lived in areas suffering from a shortage of food. Ukraine and Russia produce almost 15% of the world's wheat supply. Impoverished countries throughout the Middle East and Africa rely on wheat fields now cut off from the global supply chain, either by fighting or by blistering sanctions. The U.S. and its allies are working to prevent potentially millions of people from starving due to rising costs worldwide.
In the developing world, a typical family of a poor family spends as much as 2/3 of their income on food. And our estimates show that for each 1% increase in the food prices, 10 million people may be thrown into extreme poverty.
The war is hitting Lebanon hard, where Christian aid groups like Heart for Lebanon are trying to keep up with demand. About half of all Lebanese children are in need of assistance.
Lebanon counts on 87% of its grain and wheat from Ukraine. After the Port of Beirut explosion on August 4th, 2020, which totally destroyed the grain silos in Lebanon, we've been living off on a 1-month supply. And now when you have a war like you do in Ukraine, it's becoming very, very hard to get.
Treasury Secretary Yellen will be having a closed-door meeting with the Prime Minister of Ukraine as she tries to figure out this global food crisis, along with other global economic leaders. Jenna?
All right, Matt, thank you very much. Meanwhile, on the front lines, Russia is renewing its focus on the eastern Donbas region of Ukraine. The long-feared full-scale ground offense intensifying after a period of regrouping. Top of the agenda for Russia is the port city of Mariupol, now on the brink of falling. Ukrainian defenders, though, are vowing to fight on. Russian control of Mariupol would give Vladimir Putin a land bridge to Russian-controlled Crimea. Well, experts say this latest assault on the eastern part of Ukraine is proof sanctions have not slowed Russia's war machine. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke has more on that.
The Biden administration's approach to sanctions remains a gradual one. And while it successfully brought together a number of other countries to put economic pressure on Russia, analysts warn it's not deterring Putin's pursuit of Ukraine.
When the Biden administration announced sanctions on the 24th of February, they specifically said, in fact, the president himself tweeted that their goal was to reduce the ruble to rubble. Unfortunately, as we've seen today, with the ruble trading at higher levels against the dollar than before the attack, by their own metric, the Biden administration has failed.
Marshall Billingsley, former Assistant Secretary for Terrorist Financing at the Treasury Department, says instead of dealing a crushing blow to Russia's economy, the Biden administration has deferred to European countries that rely on Russian oil and gas.
They'd rather see the price of their heating bills in their homes be lower than to take the shorter-term economic pain to cause Putin's war machine to melt down financially.
Billingsley believes what's needed is the playbook used against Iran and Venezuela during the Trump administration. Full sanctions on the energy sector, accompanied by secondary sanctions against any country continuing to do business with Russia. Also, similar action against other valuable exports like metals and minerals. Plus, full sanctions against the entire Russian financial sector.
Why are we pulling our punches? What is the moral compass at work here? Given what we're seeing, I don't see it, and I find the refusal to fully sanction the Russian economy into the ground the way they are physically doing to the Ukrainian people. I find it morally unconscionable that we're not doing more and faster and better.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is pushing the Biden administration to trigger some of the toughest sanctions under U.S. law by designating Russia a state sponsor of terror.
There are only a handful of countries that have been designated as state sponsors of terrorism, and Russia belongs in that camp.
But would that designation and its consequences have any impact?
I don't believe Putin is in the habit of receiving messages at this stage. The key is perhaps not messaging to him, it's messaging to those around him. That unless and until the war stops in Ukraine, and perhaps unless and until Vladimir Putin is gone, the sanctions pressure will continue to grow, and Russia will be reduced back to its Soviet-era breadlines.
As fighting in Ukraine again escalates, the Biden administration says it's committed to raising pressure on Russia. Many observers are asking, however, will it be enough? Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Caitlin. Well, Ukraine follows the Eastern Orthodox calendar, which means the church is well into the Easter season there. CBN's Wendy Griffin was with worshipers in the western city of Lviv as they gather to celebrate Palm Sunday.
Lviv is home to some of the most beautiful churches in the world, and nearly 100 adorn the city. Most were shut down during the Soviet era, but the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 triggered a resurgence of the Christian faith and its churches, including this magnificent Greek Catholic Church of St. Andrew.
Here in Ukraine, it's Palm Sunday. Easter is still a week away, but the churches are packed with people praying that just as Jesus defeated death on a cross, Ukraine will also see a victory.
We have this Christian tradition that Christ is risen and Ukraine will be risen too. And we strongly believe that the enemy will fall down and we will have this victory.
Here in Lviv, considered a safe haven for residents and refugees alike, airstrikes were reported over the weekend.
Dear guests, an alien parade has been issued in Lviv. Please stay calm and go down for the reception in the shelter.
And many churches are boarded up with priceless statues heavily wrapped in case the worst happens.
So they're saying now that nobody is off limits. There is no safe havens now, not even Lviv.
Yes.
Are you scared?
Yes.
Are you worried?
Actually not scary because I understand my life belongs to Christ. I need to do what God tells me to do.
So you're not leaving?
What?
You're not leaving.
Yes, I am not supposed to leave. My wife stays with me too. I have 2 children, and we are trusting God.
Believers at Spring of Life Church are praying around the clock for their country. And Arson says during a recent time of prayer, God gave him some good news for Ukraine.
I just start praying in my spirit, and I receive this word that Russia will be defeated. Russia will be defeated. When you hearing all dangerous, all like, don't be in panic. Just lift it up your hand and pray. It will be like a shield When you lifted up your hands, it will be like a shield. And you can see our pastors, when we are praying, a lot of say, lifted up your hand, lifted up your hand. So that's what we are doing when we are hearing all the bad news, all the rockets. Yes, we got a lot of rockets in our city, Lviv too, but praise God, everybody, it's like we're doing the case.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News, Lviv, Ukraine.
Thank you, Wendy. And coming up, the next red wave. Why Republicans are betting on women and minority candidates in the November midterms. Back. Well, soaring inflation, rising crime, and war in Ukraine. These issues all spell trouble for Democrats in November, along with the fact that the party in power always faces greater challenges in the midterms. Something even more troubling for Democrats, a rising red wave of black and female candidates. Here's CBN senior Washington correspondent Tara Merchner.
Billed as the party's rising stars.
We have so many Republican women, it's hard to fit us in one press conference.
Aiming to make history.
There are 9 candidates in my race. I'm the only female candidate.
And help their team take back Congress.
This is going to be a pink wave.
Party leaders are touting another year of the Republican woman.
I am running against a man who, combined with Joe Biden, has been in office for 89 years.
Only bigger.
I'm running to save the American dream.
Thanks for the 2022 momentum going largely to Representative Elise Stefanik, the third-ranking House Republican who created EPAC to get more women elected, raising more than $3 million campaign dollars.
After the 2018 midterms, we were down to 13 Republican women. And in just one cycle, we were over 30. I actually predict that we'll be over 50 Republican women in the next Congress. Think about that.
It's a goal likely to be helped by the fierce headwinds facing the current party in power.
Voters are frustrated with what they're seeing on the border. Inflation. I've met with voters saying, I have to decide whether to put gas in my car or buy eggs for my children.
More than 280 GOP women have filed to run for Congress, beating 2020's historic high.
They called the race!
When 33 got elected, flipping 11 of the 15 seats that went from blue to red. Stefanik's group is supporting 18 candidates so far this round in what it calls the most diverse and impressive roster to date.
They are going to focus on standing up for conservative values. They are strongly pro-life. They are pro-family. And that's where the Republican voters are today. That's where this country is.
Several candidates are endorsed by former President Trump.
When you look at what President Trump was able to do in both 16 and 20 in terms of changing minds and bringing people into the party that have never voted Republican before, swinging some of those independent votes, that's a lot of what we plan to do as well.
While Democrats tout the diversity within their ranks, the GOP believes it's poised to put a record number of black Republicans in Congress.
We are seeing Republicans continuing to build on what they see is, small but, growing influence within the black voter community.
And some 80 black candidates are running this cycle.
With a new generation of leadership, we can secure our border, strengthen our economy, and put our financial house in order.
Up from 27 in 2020.
We're going to win this time. Yeah.
The lineup is well funded.
I love seeing your beautiful, maskless faces.
With some big names and famous faces on the marquee.
My name is Herschel Walker, and I'm running for the United States Senate.
Right now, black Republicans hold just 2 seats in the House, 1 in the Senate. Backers are hoping there's still wind in the sails following Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears' historic victory in Virginia.
And put your left hand on the Bible.
As the first woman of color to win statewide office.
Congratulations.
Recent polls show strong party alignment with the black community on issues like abortion, education, and immigration. Surveys show the GOP is warning about rising crime and the economy.
Shoppers are pinching pennies as inflation continues to soar.
Is also resonating. The number of black voters favoring Democrats down 21 points since last fall.
This is something that Republicans are very much trying to use to connect to all voting groups, but especially black voters.
Each Republican who flipped a Democrat-held House district in 2020 was a woman or person of color. Optimism is growing that 2022 will be the year these history makers will become majority makers. In Washington, I'm Tara Mergener, CBN News.
Thank you, Tara. And here with us now, CBN News Chief Political Analyst David Brody. David, so what do you think? How big is this coming red wave of GOP women and minorities?
Well, it's huge, and it's a huge factor, and I'm glad we did a story about it because, it's out there and it's real. Look, Jenna, let me try to kind of boil all of this down for the audience, which is this. It's very simple. The liberals, the Democrats, they overplayed their hand. I mean, it's just that simple. I mean, Joe Biden had a choice to make when he was inaugurated president. He could kind of go that centrist, that center-right route, or excuse me, center-left route, and talk about unity and do all of that. He did not do that. He did not do that. He decided to double down with the progressives and the ideology that came along with it. And because of that, independents, many of them women and minorities said, you know what? This is a bridge too far. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing now. And so, in essence, Joe Biden and the progressives have given oxygen to the GOP women that we're seeing now and many of the minorities that are coming on board with the Republicans to say, wait a minute, this isn't exactly what we signed up for when it comes to progressive politics.
David, I want to talk to you about masks and this federal judge who struck down the CDC's travel mandate. It doesn't look like the White House is going to fight back on this. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there are a couple of reasons. Look, I think they ultimately realize here that this is just politically untenable for them. I mean, they realize that, how do we say this? I say this all the time, actually. The train has left the station. I mean, it has. I mean, it took a federal judge to do it finally, put the final nail in the coffin with these masks. But this has been going on around for a long time. I mean, Americans, and we're talking about, other than the far left in this country, center and right have said, we're done. We're done with the masks. Knock yourself out for a couple of years. We're done. And so the White House is realizing politically that it would just be politically tone deaf for the White House at this point to challenge this all the way to the Supreme Court. That train has left the station. Why even do that? Here's the problem, Jenna. Technically, from a credibility standpoint, they should be challenging it, right? They have said that they believe masks are important. They've also said that the CDC has said specifically that they wanted to, or they did, extend the mask mandate on travel. So if you're going to extend it just recently by a couple of weeks, why would you then all of a sudden say, you know what, never mind? So either way, it looks bad for the White House. But that's what this is, it's all come to.
Do you think this could be a political issue in November, David?
I think so. The Democrats are going to spin it and say, look, COVID's coming to an end, masks are done and all that. And they're going to say, we're past that and all that. No, I think the damage has been done, Jenna. I don't think there's any question about it. I think Americans, especially independents, let's not talk about the right in this country or the left. Let's talk about the center of this country. I think the center of the country saw COVID tyranny up close and personal. They didn't like it. Biden overplayed his hand. And there's going to be, what to pay in November for Democrats.
All right, David Brody, we will leave it there. Thank you. Good to see you.
You bet. Good to see you.
And when we come back, why a new wave of terror has many concerned Israel could be on the brink of another war. Weeks of terror attacks, violence on the Temple Mount, and a rocket launched at southern Israel from Gaza. A wave of Palestinian strikes against the Jewish state is rising during the month of Ramadan. Israelis struck back after yesterday's rocket attack, hitting a number of Hamas targets inside the Gaza Strip. This spike in violence has many concerned that Israel is on the brink of another war. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
Israel's Iron Dome defense system knocked down the missile, and the military retaliated by taking out a Hamas weapons manufacturing site. While no group claimed responsibility for the rocket attack, Israel holds Hamas responsible for what happens inside Gaza. The confrontation follows weeks of terror attacks inside Israel that's left 14 dead, dozens wounded, and days of rioting on the Temple Mount. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett accused Hamas of inciting the violence.
There are those who are encouraging rock throwing and the use of violence against the citizens of the State of Israel. This is a reward for the inciters, especially Hamas, which are trying to ignite violence in Jerusalem.
Itamar Marcus of the Palestinian Media Watch told CBN News back in February, PA leaders called for popular resistance.
Now, what does that mean? That means that all the PLO leadership, all the PA leadership are calling for violence of individuals with knives, with guns, and especially focused on the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So this is coming from the top.
Marcus says Palestinian Authority leaders, like the top Islamic advisor to PA President Mahmoud Abbas, have called for religious violence during Ramadan. He said Ramadan is not a month of laziness, but rather a month of activity, of effort, and of hard work. And as it also was in the life of the Prophet, a month of jihad, conquest, and victory. For the first time in decades, the Muslim month of Ramadan, the Jewish Passover, and the Christian celebration of Easter have come at the same time. During Passover, Jews have been attacked in the Old City. Palestinians have thrown rocks at buses carrying Jews to the Western Wall and stockpiled stones on the Temple Mount, where the Al-Aqsa Mosque has been the epicenter of clashes with Israeli police. On the official PA TV prayer for Ramadan, an imam declared, Allah, liberate the Al-Aqsa Mosque from the defilement of the evil Jews.
Palestinians are a very religious people. Ramadan is the most important month of the year. When Palestinians hear this, they feel that in order to be a good Muslim, they've got to attack Israelis, supposedly in defense of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So this is all something that's happening from the top. Palestinians wouldn't be collecting stones if they weren't being directed from their leadership to do this.
And that was Chris Mitchell reporting from Jerusalem. Still ahead, an Easter morning surprise for residents of this Florida neighborhood. We'll be right back. Finally tonight, it's a rare sight on suburban streets in Florida. And if the Easter Bunny didn't make it to some homes outside the Sarasota area this year, this may be why. The 10-foot alligator took a leisurely stroll through this neighborhood Sunday morning. Local sheriffs were alerted and followed the gator to make sure he behaved. While the massive reptile took his sweet time, he eventually did make it back to his home, peacefully soaking up the rays on a beautiful Easter holiday. And there he goes. All right, that's going to do it for Faith Nation this evening. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great evening.